So, let's continue on from where I actually left last week, which is a rarity because normally something else crops up. But I want to talk about it now because I feel it's relevant to the situation that's going through with me at the minute. And yeah, let's go from it. Let's talk about 12-year-olds playing Call of Duty. We'll get to that, I guess, but summation first. Obviously, thanks to Mortal Kombat back in '92, we have a ratings board. Worldwide, there's various different ones. Obviously, you've got the ESRB, I think it is in America. But I'm going to show you some of the UK stuff and how they have done it and haven't done it. So, for a time, there was like two systems. The one which is still used a bit, but now really being phased out, is the BBFC, which is what they do and classify movies with. And I've got a list of games covering that whole range. So, you've got a U certificate for High School Musical, and no, don't judge me. The reason why I bought this is because it's 5p. I'm trying to get as many PS2 games as I can. If they're 5p, I'm going to buy it. Anyway, moving on. PG, which is like, I think roughly, that's supposed to be for like people 4 and under, need to be with an adult or something. Well, that's the movie classification anyway. For PG, which apparently contains moderate fantasy violence, it's like 7, 8, depending what it is. Then you've got 12, which sort of explains itself, contains moderate violence. So moderate fantasy violence, moderate violence. Sometimes I don't get that. Then this is the big one that's had me confused ever since, really, well, ever since the franchise came into being. Resident Evil. How, for the first 4 games in the series, including Code Veronica X, which I guess wasn't a game, but they were all 15s. To me, and just to show a comparison, 18 certificate, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. Mainly because they're the only ones that are accessible to me here, really, to show that. But, you know, that contains strong, bloody violence. I'd have thought that did as well. And the thing is, Resident Evil 4 was a 15 too. Well, it was also a 15 certificate. With all the sort of stuff that happens in that, like the chainsaw bloke that can basically rip you apart, how can that franchise have been a 15? I know from 5 and 6 it became an 18 certificate, but still, it's like, just how? I don't get it. So that was the old system, and you know, that was sort of my rant on the Resident Evil franchise. But there's certain other ones which I'll get to now, because the system that's now used in the UK is sort of more similar to the ESRB, and it's PEGI. I honestly don't know what PEGI stands for. I should probably have a look to see if there's any details about it. The Pan-European Games Information. I'll actually bring that out so then I can use it as details. So, first up, you've got the Freeze, which is, they're colour-coded now, they're not anymore. Well, they weren't originally, which you'll see in some of my purchases, or some of the things that I've got. But yeah, Pro Evolution Soccer, certificate 3. Understandable. Then you get Malice, which is a certificate 7. The reason why? Because of violence. But again, due to the content of the game, this is more of like fantasy-style violence. Then we get Beatles Rock Band, which for some reason is a 12. I think it's like yellow for 7 and slightly orange for 12. For some reason, this is a 12 for bad language and sex. I don't remember any of the Beatles lyrics having swearing in. I can see some of the sexual references, like Polypheme Pam in her jackboots and kilt, and pornographic priestess from Why on the Walrus, but still, 12, not sure. Even the Buzz games that came out for PS2, PS3, they were certificate 12 in terms of the PEGI rating. I don't know. 16, we get Jump Up. Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay. I'm amazed this was 75p. I just love it. Again, this is because of violence, the reason why it's that certificate. And then finally, Aliens Colonial Marines, which I purchased brand new, cheaper than it would have been pre-owned. And I get DLC from game or whatever. But again, that's because of bad language and violence, but it's more like to be bloody violence, because obviously it's an Aliens franchise game thing. Apparently, some of the others, there is a certificate for fear. There's a certificate for sexual content, so I'm guessing that's what that was. Drugs, which obviously would be relevant in, I don't know, GTA or something like that. And discrimination. I mean, probably GTA has covered all of them. Now, of course, as I try and find them. Oh, it's because I'm looking in completely the wrong place. The main prolific offenders are obviously the GTA games. In terms of when you look at all the abuse that there is about, oh, why are these kids playing these video games? No. I will admit, Vice City, okay, this is the Xbox version, but the PS2 version, I did have Underage. I will admit that. But I believe that even though I made the purchases myself, I felt that I was capable of taking it on and dealing with the stuff. Some people, like occasionally you see these stories of people that actually get, you know, Battlefield games and Call of Duty because they honestly think that they are part of an actual army and they're using it as training. There was a game that came out, Full Spectrum Warrior, which actually was sort of the basis from an actual US Marine training thing and got incorporated into a game. Now, of course, I brought up Call of Duty. Again, specify 18 certificate. If I remember what it is. 18 certificate for Call of Duty, which has pretty much been the certificate all throughout the franchise. Probably from Call of Duty. Call of Duty 2 and 3 I know were 15s. But certainly Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1 or Call of Duty 4, whatever you want to call it, that was, I think, an 18 certificate. Yeah, I've talked about that, and this is where I start to get into the stuff. At the minute, I'm trying to make plans for the EGX Expo in September for myself, where I don't know whether I'll do video coverage from it on here or, you know, on my Sticks and Flicks podcast on the SNS Radio Network. Cheap plug. But the one thing that cropped up the first year that I went in 2012 and 2013 and the Resd sort of PC, indie, and now really next-gen expos that happen closer to me at other points in the year, there is always, for the past, every time there's been a convention previously, not 2014 so far, thankfully, but there has also always been at least a dozen tweets between when they start announcing the games and the event, with people saying, "Oh, I'm 16, can I play Call of Duty?" And it specifically says on the website it's an 18-plus game, and it's going to be in an 18-plus area that people aged 18-plus can only play. And then, after, you know, the organisers come back and say it's 18-plus, I'm sorry, you can't play it. Sometimes it's parents that are basically saying, my son is 16, can they play it? And then they come with, but I believe that they can play it. No, the reason why you can't play it is because they don't want to get done for something that goes wrong, which could easily happen. And as I say, I'm guilty of getting games myself, you know, at an early age, but that was like independent shops. It never happened. I never even tried really at the major chains because I knew it wasn't going to happen. And this is the problem now that I have seen a few times when I've been round official chain stores. I won't mention names because it's more than one. Parents basically take GTA 5, hand it to the cashier with their like 6 or 7-year-old kid in tow. Even Call of Duty, you know, I'm not saying it's just GTA, but I'm saying all these games that have clearly like 16 or 18 certificates, there are kids that, you know, when I was buying the games, when I was underage, I was about 15 or 16 when I was buying 18 certificates. So that I can personally accept because I feel that I can cope with them. I don't think I'm a violent person after playing all these and whatever. But when you see 7 or 8-year-old kids basically saying, I want this one, and the parents handing it over, and the staff saying, you know, is this for your son or your daughter? And they say yes, and saying, well, you know, they're not really an age, and the parents then say, well, it's my choice, I decide what I do. I sort of accept it if it's a couple of years difference, like the situation that I was in. If the person is half the age of the rating, you know, let's say a 9-year-old buying an 18, that's where I draw the line. That's where it just goes, no. And obviously this ties into the whole violent video games debate, which I sort of want to cover here as well. Because everyone goes, oh, you know, all these spates of violence, it's all because of video games. It's solely that. It's solely that. No, it's nothing else. It's just video games. It's not media. It's not, you know, the web. It's not television. It's solely video games. You know, a person commits, you know, a mass shooting. Oh, they play Call of Duty all the time. Yeah, that's the reason. My problem is games like this should be played for people in or around the age group. Case in point, last year's Call of Duty Ghosts, when it was on at the expo in London, they actually specified a 16 certificate. They purposefully lowered it so they knew that the people that are in that age bracket can play it. If they want to get it outright, they won't be able to because they won't be in the age restriction because Ghost was an 18. But because they basically knew that people were going to respond to it like they did, that's why they changed the age. Obviously, people under 16 still couldn't play. There were 12-year-old kids, and it's like, well, I play the franchise all to get, you know, I've played all the other games in the franchise, and I'm kind of going, is this a problem? You know, kids are being desensitized. And it's not because of other things in the media. I honestly also think it's bad parenting. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not. This is not the rule. There are always exceptions, but I just feel that if you are buying your child GTA 5 and they're not in double figures, they won't. They will just treat it as something to play with. The whole idea of stuff like GTA 5, like Call of Duty, like Spec Ops: The Line, is it's not a shooter. There's deep stuff to it. You know, Spec Ops: The Line is based really off Apocalypse Now sort of thing. So there's sinister stuff there. If underage people play that, they won't get it. Only the more advanced mind of a teenager, young adult, whatever you want to call it, will fully sort of realise what's going on. Like with the No Russian level for Modern Warfare 2. Some people would just want to... Okay, they did the skip thing because they knew it would cause controversy. But I feel that if a young kid would play it, they would just... The fact that they were told to basically shoot anybody, they would do it without the connotation of this is you being an undercover agent having to kill all these innocent people. And I think a lot of people put pressure on the stores basically saying you shouldn't sell it to them. And don't get me wrong, they are very good at that. You know, if it's a person by themselves, they pretty much say if you're underage you can't get it. The issue is when the parents come along, the parents basically are buying it for the kids, but technically because an adult is buying it, they can try to basically say, you know, I don't think it's suitable for your kid, but then they get on their high haunches and say, I know what is best for my child. And my question is, do they? Because we've had plenty of instances where parents have thought their child is one sort of behaviour, and away from the parent's eye, it's completely different. Case in point, a story that came up in the news the past week. There was some like 19 or 20-year-old British girl in, I think it was Mallorca, in one of the Spanish islands. I know that. Might have been Ibiza, I'm not sure. But she was basically so blind drunk away from her parents on holiday there on a special trip that she was basically doing I don't think she was doing sexual acts, but she was basically grinding and bumping at least 30 different men in one club. And, you know, it's a case of, you know, the parents might think their child is mild-mannered and can cope with it, but away from it, you give a young person an opportunity, they'll probably go a bit, I don't know, crazy isn't the right word, off the handle, I guess. Crazy's a little bit too harsh, but it's just that and the problem is, especially with Call of Duty, all these 12-year-olds have got microphones. And certainly, when you get to games, especially at launch, the people that are doing all the swearing and all the abuse on those things, you know, basically, you know, take that, cocksucker, and, you know, I'll put you, you know, I'm trying to be nice here. I'm not going to use swear words, because this is going to be a civilized debate, and, well, not really debate, because it's one-sided, because it's only my fault, but a civilized talk, should I say, on the issue. These 12-year-olds come out with all this abuse and everything, And, some might say, oh, it's because they're from a certain region. They might be from, the deep south and might have, family views like that, which I get and everything, but the fact that every time it's cropped up, pretty much the ones that are hurling the most amount of abuse in games are kids that shouldn't be playing them. You can tell their voice hasn't broken. They must be at least 12 or 13, possibly less, and they're hurling all this abuse. Do you think people would take this sort of abuse in real life? If you were standing up at the bank opposite the clerk and they basically went to the, here's your effing money, sod off. Again, I've cleaned it up. But that sort of conduct wouldn't be accepted. So why do we keep seeing it over and over again on... I keep bringing up Call of Duty, but that's because it's the main offender in terms of awareness, because it's the biggest one, it's the biggest franchise that there is, that's the biggest one to pick on. Why can't parents realise that they should only get the game when the time is right, not because the kid says so? I just because, the child goes, oh, it's the new Call of Duty, I want that. Just, take a second think, if you've got a child that wants it. No, do you want, basically, them to be a bad role model? Because it's this sort of thing that is the reason why the games industry can't be properly taken seriously. And it's Shining's examples of the opposite effect of this. Where there's been really no kids playing it, or if they have, they obviously haven't been vocal because the majority of the game is single player. The Last of Us. The Last of Us is an 18 certificate game because it's got a lot of deep story. It's got violence. Thankfully, it hasn't got sex because it's a game by Naughty Dog and not a game by David Cage. Because apparently that has to be every single game David Cage has done. It's had a sex scene. I don't know what is up with that. Why he wants to make interactive porn. That's another matter. The majority of people, from what I know, that have The Last of Us are over 18. They're not kids. Despite the fact it's got all this acclaim for being Game of the Year, Game of the Generation, and, the next gen version coming in a few weeks. Perhaps there is a bright side. Perhaps we're turning the corner. Certainly Microsoft is trying to, and Sony, not so much Nintendo because that's really a child-friendly service as it is, but they're trying to basically ban or take action against people that are offensive or discriminate, and are just plain abusive on voice chat and everything, and accounts that are set up for children that have adult games. They sort of are taking a whole stance of, you can't play this. Perhaps we're now starting to see that the games that should be played by the right ages are finally coming round. And yeah, I guess on a final note, that's where we need to go. And by the way, if you were over the age of 24, You have been legally allowed to see this. Actually, I take that back. You should be over the age of 84.